Hello and welcome to the Northeast Ohio Media Group Candidate Debates. I'm Bruce Geiselman. Today we're hosting a debate for the Lakewood City School Board race. And 6 candidates are running for 3 openings on the school board this November. They're incumbent Linda Beebe, who unfortunately could not be here with us tonight. Next to me is a candidate Gregory Calleri, then incumbent Tom Einhouse, candidate Meghan George, candidate Kristine Pagsuyoin, sorry if I stumbled over that a little bit, and incumbent Emma Petrie-Barcelona. Mr. Calleri, why don't we start with you and introduce yourself and tell us why you're running.
Thank you. My name is Gregory Calleri, and for the past 18 years, my family and I have lived in Lakewood. The reason I'm running is I see a unique opportunity to use my skills, experiences, and knowledge to meet the challenges we face. These skills include having taught for 5 years in the inner city, which gives me unique firsthand knowledge of the challenges our teachers face and the support they need. Creating Burning River Lacrosse, one of the top lacrosse programs in the Midwest, where I have to deal with children, parents, local and college coaches, and the community on a daily basis. This has given me a wealth of knowledge in listening to concerns, dealing with diverse opinions, and creative problem solving. I also have worked for 10 years in the finance industry as a sell-side analyst, where I researched, evaluated, and reported on public and private companies, which has enabled me to develop an extensive set of skills in financial planning, forecasting, and budget optimization. I also spent 3 years sitting on the city's audit committee, where I've seen firsthand how we can better manage our school's finances, control spending without layoffs, and create financial stability. None of the other candidates have the financial skills and experience I do, which is extremely important as we're dealing with a $70 million budget and 2 levies already passed.
Okay. Mr. Einhouse, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name is Tom Einhouse. I'm a lifelong Lakewood resident. I'm the father of 2. One is graduated from Lakewood High. The other one is a senior this year. I myself graduated from Lakewood High. I'm the vice president at the company where I work and have overseen extensive renovations and restorations within that company, and I have used my expertise to help guide the city on a number of issues. I've chaired the Planning Commission, chaired the Board of Zoning Appeals, and I am completing a very successful term as a school board member. Having worked very well and very collaboratively with my other board members, we're in the midst of a $100 million capital improvement project with 3 elementary schools and a high school, and my expertise has played in greatly with that, understanding what goes on with contracting and financing of such projects.
Okay, and Meghan George, why don't you tell us about yourself and why you're running?
Sure, absolutely. Well, my name's Meghan, and I'm also a lifelong Lakewood resident. I'm actually a 3rd generation Lakewood resident. My grandparents taught in the Lakewood schools back in the 60s and 70s. I myself also am a graduate of Lakewood High School. Following Lakewood High School, I attended Ohio State, where I pursued a degree towards education. And then graduating from Ohio State, I got a post-baccalaureate and got my teaching license in education. Currently, I'm close to finishing my Master's of Education Administration. I think I bring a unique perspective to the board, being a Lakewood resident, someone who's graduated from Lakewood, and I also taught in the Lakewood schools for a few years up at Harding Middle School. So I've worked at and I also worked at Lakewood Recreation Department. So along with being a lifelong Lakewood resident, attending the schools, working in the schools, and now I'm in the private sector as a consultant. So I think I bring a unique perspective.
Okay, and Kristine Pagsuyoin.
Hi, thank you very much. Since 1998, I've been a teacher, worked with nonprofit organizations in Lakewood, focused on issues that affect kids and families. I have collaborated side by side with our district administrators to solve problems, and I've been a proven leader and voice for students, parents, and teachers. These experiences have prepared me to be a positive addition to the Lakewood Board of Education. You know, I see being a member of the school board as a continuance of my work and passion in education, allowing me to work on larger projects that will help Lakewood City Schools be one of the top districts in the state. I am concerned about public education in our state. I'm committed to being a good steward of the resources provided to us by our taxpayers. I want a successful completion to the current school construction project, but mostly I want to be an engaged and responsible board member that will effectively communicate with parents and larger school community so that we are putting kids first.
Okay, and Emma Petrie-Barcelona.
Thanks, good evening. I've spent the past 4 years serving Lakewood on the Board of Education and had not only a great experience, but introduced me to the big picture about the context of our schools, the Lakewood City Schools in the city of Lakewood. I am also a Lakewood graduate. I grew up in Lakewood. My two daughters are students in the Lakewood schools, and we will be, bringing them up through every year through high school. I love this community, and I love Lakewood, and I really love public education. My career has been focused on community development and economic development, so I bring that context both as a parent and as somebody who understands public education's role within a community and what it needs to do not only for Lakewood but really more broadly for us as a society. I understand the issues that we face with the state and with local taxes and everything like that, and I look forward to being part of it again. Thank you.
All right, and then we'll move on to the first question, and we'll start with Mr. Calleri. The district is in the midst of building 3 new elementary schools and replacing 1/2 of the high school. The projects total about $100 million, with the state picking up half the cost, approximately. Do you think that the renovation projects are on the right track? Why or why not?
I can tell you as of right now, what I've been told is that all the buildings are on track. They're slightly behind, but not so far behind that we're going to have to change the calendar. They've run into some difficulties that you would normally expect in a construction project. And as somebody who spent 5 years working in construction, I probably have a good idea where we'll continue to run into these problems. So at the high school, we ran into some footer problems, asbestos abatement. We ran into a soil erosion issue over at Roosevelt, where they couldn't put the building where they wanted to because there was a problem with the soil and its ability to hold that kind of weight, so we had to reconfigure that building. But for the most part, they seem to be going fairly well. We're only using a portion of the contingency budget right now, which means we have some of that contingency budget. Maybe go back and do some of the things that the community finds a priority, and like refunding our music program or doing the acoustics for that department, as long as we can stay on track.
Okay, Mr. Einhouse.
Same question.
Yes.
The projects, I can tell you, are on track. They are on budget. We are working closely. By the way, the percentage that the state provides is not half; it's actually 31%.
31. Okay.
31%, and that's the state's co-funding of that entire project. As Mr. Calleri points out, things are well within the time frame. We've had a little bit of slippage on schedule, but that's built into the schedule. So we're very confident that we're going to get a lot of bang for our buck. There's quite a bit that we're packing into the program. Okay,
Meghan George.
Yeah, I would say I think the schools are on budget and on track to get finished timely. It's great to see new schools throughout the district, talking with teachers in Lakewood and teachers of other districts. They like to see the new construction and the new buildings, the new technology that is in those buildings. The smart boards are great. So I think we're in a good direction with the new schools and the new buildings, and I'm excited to see the high school when it's finally completed. So I think we are on track. I think we're doing a nice job. Okay,
Kristine, Pagsuyoin.
Yeah, thank you. So I've attended and watched school board meetings online, and from what we're hearing from our superintendent and our school board, as everybody has mentioned, we're on track. And so ensuring the successful completion on time and on budget is really important. And so since we seem to be on time, I guess I will offer a different perspective and something that we need to remember. I served on the Phase 3 committee and helped decide some of these issues, and so it has special meaning to me. Construction will be over in a couple of years, and so we'll need to focus on what we're building on the inside. And that's real important for me as a new board member coming on. For me, that means continue with great teachers, technology, and programs that reflect Lakewood values and prepare our kids for a global market. It's an exciting time. And I'm hoping with the new facilities built that our public will have access and that we'll use them to their fullest extent. And I would support policies that do such a thing.
Okay. Emma Petrie-Barcelona.
We've covered that they're on track, on budget at this point.
Right.
Indeed. So a few things I want to mention is one thing that's unique about this project is that the state not only is putting in some money, but they're our co-owner, which means the state directs a lot of the, I guess, the big picture concepts of what we can do and what they're not going to help pay for. And those other aspects are locally funded initiatives. And I would say that this board has been really strategic with the administration and the community to make sure that we have those locally funded initiatives. We're putting money into things that Lakewood residents want and need and that the community wants for these spaces. The other thing I'd like to note too is that we managed to do this with very low cost borrowing. When we went out to Moody's and Standard & Poor's, we came back with a very, very high rating, especially for a municipal or government in the Rust Belt. And we're able to refund old bonds and get new bonds issued at very low interest rates. So we're doing this at a very low cost, as low as possible. And then also just that we did pass the permanent improvement levy, or the community did, to help make sure that we are able to maintain these new structures into the next generations. The school that I went to, that my daughters went to, Lincoln, was there for 100 years. And we couldn't get people, there was no elevator. If you had mobility issues, you couldn't get there. All of these buildings will have the right environment and will be open and accessible to the community.
Okay. And should we go on to the next question? Does anyone have a follow-up to that? Okay. Then we'll go on to Mr. Einhouse. And as you had mentioned, voters in 2013 approved that bond issue to pay for the new schools. And also in May, I believe they approved a $3.9 million operating levy too. What's the school district doing, or what more can the school district do to try and extend the time period before you have to go back to the voters to ask for more money?
Well, it's a combination of really balancing the resources and the revenues. And the school board, the administration, works very hard in negotiating with the teachers, for instance, in purchasing contracts to make sure that we're getting the highest value. In the side of the teachers, we want them to be respected and have the highest value for what they do and want to be part of the Lakewood community. So it really is that careful balance that every business and every household goes through of managing resources, what's coming in, what's going out, and getting the greatest bang for the buck. I can tell you, when I sit in the board meetings, when I hear reports from the treasurer and the other aspects of the school system, I am always very impressed with the level of diligence that goes into purchases, simple purchases, complicated purchases, and negotiations.
Okay. And Meghan George.
Yeah. I think historically, Lakewood, the city of Lakewood, has always done a nice job in supporting our students. I think we've passed, numerous levies. The community has always supported our school system, and I think that's why we have such a strong school system today. But I agree. In order to, keep another levy off the books, if you will, is looking at contracts. You want to hire the best, the brightest, and look at where we're spending our money on both top-notch educators, but also top-notch administrators who can be at the schools.
Okay. And Kristine Pagsuyoin.
Yes, thank you. So we know funding for our schools isn't fair in the state of Ohio. The funding formula is unconstitutional, which forces us to go back to our voters every several years to fund our schools. That's a reality. And I think what we really need to look at and be assured that we're doing, because when people give us their taxes and trust us with their money, we need to balance that with some of the things I've heard already. What are our resources? What are our costs? But we also need to make sure that our spending reflects our values. And so I think there's a delicate balance that we are meeting the standards, providing what we need to, while reflecting what is cherished and treasured, but also really prepares our kids for the global market they're going to go into, such as our music program, which is a gem here in Lakewood and is experiencing some difficulty. So we need to be good stewards. We need to make sure we're meeting the state standards at the same time that we are reflecting Lakewood values in our budgets.
Okay. And Emma Petrie-Barcelona.
So I'm glad that Ms. Pagsuyoin brought up that the state has a lot to do with school funding here in Lakewood. We as taxpayers, of course, are footing the bill for public education, and it's based on where we live and our house values. And so we do have to be, as a board, and a district, very mindful of the fact that people are sharing their resources and what we need to do with these resources. So with regard to the state at least, that has been, over the past few years, an increasingly challenging situation such that they're changing formulas and changing how they fund public education every 2 years. There was some predictability in the past, that's gone. And so now we are fortunate to have not only a very talented treasurer, but also fiscal staff on the schools who can help make sure that we're ahead of the game, that we can plan our future in appropriate and meaningful ways, and that we have a better understanding of where we are right now. I think overall it's the big picture of managing where we are. We're reimbursed from the state based on the number of students in our district, and our school district has been getting smaller the past few years, about 100 students a year. So those are resources that are going down, and that we do have to manage what we have and where the resources are going very appropriately. And I think in light of that, and along with the tax resources, that we've been doing a very good job the past few years.
Okay, and Mr. Calleri.
Thank you. Our community has been incredibly generous in giving us 2 levies over the last 5 years. Where we've struggled as a school board and struggled as a group is providing the leadership needed to better maintain our cost structure and not have to keep going back to our cities. Our forecast currently calls for us to be short somewhere between $14 and $20 million over the next 4 to 5 years, which means we're going to have to come back to the taxpayers in the next 2 years for another levy. I'll tell you, I was in an audit meeting last week, and the state is not cutting our funding. It's actually flat for the next 2 years, is the numbers we got back from our treasurer. Our problem is all around our cost and how we need to go about controlling that cost. I'll give you an example. I sit on the city's audit committee, and we've been able to keep the city's insurance growth in premiums and costs to about 4% over the last 6 years, while the schools have seen their insurance rise over 12%. If we had been able to maintain and do what the city had done, we would have over $5 million extra that we could use to better serve our schools and our students. I can also tell you that in the audit committee, because of my skills in finance and my knowledge and experience, while we were going through a review of the budget, I found 4 different places that we could come up with the money to replace the teacher that was cut in the music program. So it's not a case of people not wanting to do it, it's a case of making sure we have people with the right skill sets, experience, and knowledge to find what we need to better serve our people so we don't have to come back for another levy in 2 years.
Okay, and I think everyone has had an opportunity with this, but are there any follow-up comments?
If I may,
sure.
I would just like to note that the Lakewood City Schools are part of a consortium for healthcare. So we're pooling risk, which is actually the smartest thing to do, where the city is self-insured. So I just would note that we are part of a consortium, and people are constantly looking at that with regard to healthcare and those costs. So I just want to say, and the only other note I would say with regard to music is just to be sure that indeed there are still the same number of music teachers as there were last year. Indeed, one position moved from full-time to half-time, and that is a direct result primarily of the fact that we have fewer students in the schools, and every department in the school district has fewer teachers than they did, say, 5 or even 10 years ago.
And I would add that all music programs are in place as they have been.
Okay.
The music programs
I could like to
are
comment
not.
to that.
Go
Okay.
ahead. I'll let
Okay.
you go first.
The music program is intact in regard to, for example, let me just point out the middle schools, where a student comes in, if they want to be in choir or play an instrument, they have to choose. That was one of the reasons why the enrollment started to go down. Also last year, they made kids choose between music and math classes. But that aside, we have been dismantling over the years, and so many of those programs that we used to have that were standard during the day became extracurriculars. And so that's the way we were serving children. Those extracurriculars are in place. However, now we are not paying those teachers a stipend. Those teachers are working free to provide those extracurriculars. It is my opinion that we should not be in the business of allowing professional licensed teachers teach for free. They should be paid for the work they do because they are essentially providing programs that were not being provided during the day.
Am I allowed to respond?
I can't recall, did you respond earlier? Or?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
No, sir. I want to go back to 2 things. One, on the insurance. We do belong to a consortium, but the consortium has not been doing a good job of keeping our costs down. So while we've managed to spread our risk, financially, we could have $5 million extra to us if we did a better job of going outside and finding a way to maintain or follow what the natural curve is, rather than what's happening now, which is our costs are rising and rising despite being in the consortium. And at a time when $50,000 is a teacher, we can't be throwing $5 million away. And as for the music program, I agree with Kristine. My kids are in the schools. We're seeing less and less opportunities. And you can call a half-time teacher a full-time teacher, but at the end of the day, we cut the availability to instruction for our kids. And if you're doing that, you're eating your feed corn. And down the road, we're going to struggle. And this is the #1 priority of our community, is our music program. It's what we're known for, and it's what we should be supporting. And as I said, in the audit meeting, I found 4 places, no problems, to refund that position.
Okay. Should we move on to the next question, or? Sure. Okay. Now, Superintendent Jeff Patterson this year received a 2.5% pay raise, and correct me if I'm wrong here, and I understand his pay is now up to $173,000 a year. In 2014, Northeast Ohio Media Group and the Plain Dealers surveyed 29 suburban school districts, and at that point, Mr. Patterson had the highest salary of the superintendents we looked at. Obviously, he's very experienced, but does he deserve that salary? Can the school district afford that salary? Why or why not? And I guess we're starting with Meghan George at this point.
Yeah. You know, I think our superintendent's pay, along with our treasurer, who have you, really needs to be in line with the other suburbs. Now, you're also comparing Lakewood, a suburb of over 50,000, to other suburbs which are much smaller. So I think first off, it needs to be in line with the rest of the packages. So, you know, we want the best, the brightest, and if we need to pay, you know, what have you to have them here, then I think we need to. You know, we need to make sure that Lakewood is a top-notch school now and moving forward in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Kristine,
right?
So this is a very difficult question because someone who's been close to the school district, and I work with Mr. Patterson for the past 2 years on a monthly basis as the president of the Lakewood Council of PTAs. And my job was to meet with them monthly and to identify and solve problems with parents and teachers. And so I know he works very hard. I think that if you compare his salary to what his counterpart would be in the corporate world, we get a bargain. But I also know that people look at all kinds of things when they look at administrators' salary. Are they getting a retirement from somewhere else? How does that compare to other schools? And so I think what I can do to sort of weigh, because we're talking about how much is somebody worth, what value do they bring? And when you're engaged and out in the community and listening to what people want, what I'm hearing is people think that's still a good value. People like the job that he's doing. They feel like it's a fair salary. And that speaks to me. Now, down the road, do we need to look at how we negotiate our salaries as when we look to see if they're getting a salary from another school district? I do. I think that turns people off. They don't like to hear the word double dipping. But I hold high regard for Mr. Patterson, and I do think people think he's doing a fine job and deserves the salary that he receives.
Okay, Mrs. Petrie-Barcelona.
Thanks. So one thing that's unique to Lakewood is that our superintendent and treasurer are in charge of not only the Lakewood City Schools, but also the West Shore Career Technical District, the Lakewood City Academy, which is a community conversion school, as well as the Recreation Department. We're one of only 3 communities in the state where the Recreation Department is part of these schools versus a city or other entity. So we have people running or in charge of 4 elements, albeit the largest and most important really is the Lakewood City Schools itself. And when you do step back and consider what a CEO of an organization who has hundreds of employees, more than 5,000 sort of direct consumers, along with the stakeholders that they have, their families and the entire community, this salary pales in comparison what somebody who manages this would have to do, knowing that it's a job that is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, albeit some people are, and Mr. Patterson has been able to take vacation occasionally, but he's on his phone and he's working with us or the administration consistently. So I do think when we look at this, that Lakewood, it is appropriate that Lakewood, given all these responsibilities, would have a higher wage than other places. And I do think it's important to have stability in a district that you reward somebody who's doing well. Superintendent Patterson was Ohio Superintendent of the Year last year. His peers and the state of Ohio determined that he is the best of the best, and we should reward that. And his increase was in line with the entire district this past year.
Yeah, everybody got 2.5%, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And Mr. Einhouse? I'm sorry, Mr. Calleri. It's okay. You're right next to me.
It must be the bald. I think we need to separate the two things. One is Mr. Patterson, and I have no problem with Mr. Patterson, how he's being paid or what he asked for. But at a time when we're looking at being short $14 to $20 million, where we're cutting our priorities in music and other areas, how do you go out and justify from a perspective, saying to the community, we're going to take this money that could have been used for your music teacher and give it to the superintendent and treasurer instead? You know, as somebody who's run companies, been a CEO, been there, the last thing you do is cut your valuable people and send them a message that they're not important to you so that you can take a raise. You turn around and say, I'm not taking a raise this year so we can continue to do this. I also have a problem with how we're going about paying him. While his salary is $173,000, he actually makes $260,000. We put almost $20,000 into a separate retirement account that's written into the back of the contract. We pay his FICA and Medicare taxes. We allow him to have 50 sick days that we cash out 20 a year at $1,000. If we're going to do that and he's worth that kind of money, then let's just come out and tell the people of Lakewood, we need him here, this is why he's here, and this is what we have to pay him. I don't like the fact that we're going through a back door in the back pages of the contract to pay this man, and then turning around and telling the city the things that you have that are priorities, we're not going to be able to fund because we've done this. I'll also say that I've been out, you know, I recently cut a video, I went to 7,000 houses, and the community is upset about this. They're not happy about it.
Okay, Mr. Einhouse.
Mr. Patterson is the best of the best, and to recruit the best of the best and retain the best of the best, you have to be competitive with the salaries. Again, he's a man who runs 4 different businesses, has about 700 employees, 5,400 students, 11 buildings. It's a big job, and if we put him up against any other CEO, even at over $200,000, the man is a bargain. And his entire comp package has been already published in the paper, so there's no backdoor dealings or anything secretive about what he's receiving. And it's all been said, so.
Okay. Are there any follow-ups at this point?
I'd like to respond. Woody mentions that you went out to 7,000 houses, and I can appreciate that because I've been there and knocked on doors and did the same thing for months and on end. I get that. But I think it's really how we frame the discussion. And when you tell people, you know, they're cutting your music teacher and paying and giving somebody a salary, I mean, our administrators, the way that they negotiate, they take the same raise that our teachers take. They're not asking for more. They're asking for, you know, as Emma and Tom has mentioned, you know, rewarded for what they do. And I think we had to be clear about the music because, and maybe this is something that somebody can clarify for me today because it's been tough to find out. But, you know, the music department, we're not being sold that teacher is not being replaced because of cost. We're being told that it's an enrollment issue, which I disagree with. But I think it's how you frame it, and I think if you have people coming to you and say, that's not fair, the superintendent's getting too much money compared to, but when they really understand all that he does, then they think about it and are much more supportive of our superintendent.
Okay.
Can I respond?
All right.
I absolutely agree on some of the parts. And as somebody who spent all these years doing research and finance, when I go out and talk to people, I don't ask them. I'm trying to bring back what the community is telling us. And I think that's one of the issues that we're having here is there's a missing link between our community, our teachers, and our leadership right now of their concerns and addressing them and listening to them. I've heard from a lot of people that they're being told, we don't want to hear from you. So, you know, that's a big issue. And so when I go out and meet with people, it's usually what they're telling me. I'm not going out looking for, hey, is there a way I can hang the school board up? The second part is I was at the June meeting when we did have 30 people speak. And at that point, it was told to us that it was a cost issue. Things may have changed. And I know at that point, we were losing a whole teacher, and now we're losing only half a teacher.
Quarter of a teacher, right.
We went from a full-time teacher to a half teacher.
Yeah, which is worse. So they're saying it's a quarter teacher that we're essentially losing and at a cost of about $6,000.
I will say that our next question is going to be on that topic.
Yeah, okay.
Let's jump right to it.
Okay. So, as has already been brought up and discussed a bit anyway, the school district recently reduced the number of middle school music teachers, which attracted a lot of parent complaints at the board meetings. And I think in the end, what ended up happening, and I know Mrs. Petrie-Barcelona discussed this at a recent board meeting, as she mentioned, I think that they ended up reducing it by just a half a teacher. My understanding is that 3 teachers retired and that you replaced it with 2.5 equivalent. So was that reduction justified? Why and why not? And we're starting with Mrs. Pagsuyoin now.
Oh, sure. Well, I've kind of have said a little bit about how I feel about that. As a parent, let's put that I'm a teacher and that I've already said I don't agree that our teachers ought to be providing extracurriculars without extra pay, without a stipend. Our coaches get that, club members, club advisors get that. They should be paid for the work that they're doing. As a parent and somebody who has a child in music, who also supports parents who have children in music, I feel that this was a time when the school board could really show good faith in that give and take that you often have to balance between values and our budget restrictions, or enrollment as well in this case. And that is, we've passed levies, we've passed bonds, we pay to play, we purchase the uniforms, we purchase the instruments or rent them, we pay for the lessons, we have hard-working music teachers who work some months of the year in the evenings, every night of the week. And I think, you know, we show the support to the school board by continuing to fund the schools, and this, it seems now that we're in a position where we're almost in a power struggle. And so little is needed to make that better for the music teachers that I quite don't understand why we just can't go ahead, get that teacher.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. You can have an opportunity to respond later if you want.
Thank you.
And Mrs. Barcelona.
Thank you.
Petrie-Barcelona.
That's fine. I actually think that in this case, this is an example of balancing values. And when I talk about enrollment going down, I'm not talking about music in particular. It is our entire district, which means we're getting reimbursed from the state at a lower rate, and we are trying to expand the time between now and the next levy. All of that is to say the proposal came through the administration to rehire 2 versus 3. After not only hearing from the public, but hearing from the teachers, parents, and students, I mean, and those voices were probably some among the most important, it was very clear that that was not appropriate at all. But with an additional person working a schedule, every single class and extracurricular could be maintained. On top of it, the middle school schedule changed. So that did change when some activities were occurring. We have already worked, and coming through right now, we are paying some of those extracurricular positions now. Those have to be negotiated with contracts, and that's part of this plan for this whole year, is to think through broadly the music and performing arts program at Lakewood, how we can do it at all levels, make sure we're deploying the resources, and indeed, if there's that need, and it likely could be there, then we have the resource there to make sure it's filled and that people are being compensated fairly for their time and efforts with regard to music. I am a product of the music program. It was so important to me and my development, my family's development experience. I just want to make sure it's there for perpetuity.
Okay. And Mr. Calleri.
Thank you. I want to correct one thing first. I was in the audit meeting last week, and I know you weren't there, but our treasurer was pretty clear. We are not having a reduction in state funding for the next 2 years. So we keep saying that, but it's just not true. In terms of the music program, we have teachers running between buildings. We have lost programs. We're pushing programs to after school rather than funding them. We're seeing kids having to choose in the middle school. And I'll tell you, I went and worked with hundreds of companies, good and bad, hundreds of CEOs that I met with. And I'll tell you, every single good company told me the same thing. If it's a priority, we fund it and we go after it, and that's something that we do. And the bad companies were the ones who would say to me, this is a priority for us, but we're going to de-emphasize it, we're going to defund it, we're not going to make it a priority. And that's what we're seeing here. Our community has been incredibly good to us. They've passed 2 levies and a 3rd one for our buildings, and we're turning around and they're telling us music is a priority. It's what we're known for in Lakewood, it's what we're famous for in Lakewood, it's what we see when we talk about Lakewood, and we're turning around and saying we're not going to take care of this at a time when, as I noted, I found 4 different places that we could easily come up with this money and take care of this and refund our priorities, rather than telling the community, thank you for your money, we're going to spend it somewhere else.
Okay, Mr. Einhouse.
Personally, I've been in the arts my entire career. My wife has been in the arts her entire career. Both of our sons were in the music program, and we've been funders of the Music Boosters throughout the entire career of our kids in school. To say that we don't care or we're diminishing the programs is absolutely not true. When we look at the embellishments that are going into the new schools, we are going with locally funded initiatives. The music department at the high school is very robust, and we are committed to having robust programming. But to say that we need to watch the money, we do need to watch the money. And watching the money is a careful balance of enrollment and resources. We have stated and remain committed to keeping the programs intact and doing everything we can. And as Emma pointed out, we are going to be spending a lot of time over the next year looking at how we can do that and how we can further embellish those programs.
Okay. Meghan George.
Yeah, I do believe it is all about balance. So you have to take what's happening today, which is we are seeing decreased enrollment in the schools. Population is leaving the city. So you do need to identify where's the budget at and then where we need to be. Lakewood historically has always had a phenomenal music program, and I want that to continue. But we do need to balance. It is all about balance. Where we can fund the program and to stay in line where the budget needs to be. So we're not asking people of the city of Lakewood every year for a new levy. So that's where I feel on that.
Okay. Any follow-ups?
I want to respond.
Okay.
I want to be clear about what I meant by enrollment. And I didn't mean total enrollment of our school district. I meant enrollment in the music program. It was told to us in a presentation at the meeting that Mr. Calleri referenced that our music enrollment is down. However, I disagree with those numbers. I think there were some mistakes, and I think that enrollment that year was a product of policies that forced kids to choose between extra math class at the middle school or your instrument. That put parents in a very difficult position to do what is the right thing and best thing for their child. And we can throw around some numbers. I've talked to the music teachers. They're understanding this, that adding a quarter of a teacher at $6,000 would satisfy them. And so I think we need to be careful when we talk about balance. It's also about priority. And I do believe we can cut something else out to fund that priority.
Okay. Mrs. Petrie-Barcelona.
So I just want to note that, well, the first thing with regard to Mr. Calleri's statements, what I'm talking about is state reimbursement. We are reimbursed from the state per pupil. Yes, the state held us harmless, so to speak. The same money is coming in. We're talking about two different things, so I really don't appreciate the insinuation that somehow that it's not there. So anyway, with regard to the overall policies, I do think, to Ms. Pagsuyoin's point, that is an issue, and that's part of why the schools are looking at this more comprehensively this next year. Scheduling for arts programs and making choices has been too much of an issue, and that is part of why the administration and the teachers are working together this year to try to make sure that that doesn't happen in the future, so that we can potentially expand arts opportunities during the day. During the summer, unfortunately, is not the time that schedules can be redone.
Okay.
So.
All right. You want to respond?
Sure. There was a comment made about we're doing all these embellishments to the new schools for the music program, but I guess my question is, then why then are we asking the music boosters to come up with $324,000 of their own dollars for their acoustics if we're doing all these embellishments? What am I missing here?
That's the level of acoustics that they're requiring or that they desire, which is above the standards.
Which is what, when we passed the levy, we told people we were going to do, correct?
No, it's not correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
We made no comments about specific acoustic embellishments.
Okay. Moving on to the next question. And I guess we'll be going with Mrs. Petrie-Barcelona. In 2014, I was looking online today, the school district on the state report card earned, I believe, was 2 A's.
This will be the last question.
Oh, all right. Okay. The district earned 2 A's, 2 B's, 3 C's, 2 D's, and 1 F on the state report card. And the F was for annual measurable objectives for gap closing, which I guess looks at the performance of specific minority groups and students with disabilities, as I understand it. What can the district do to try and improve those grades? I mean, obviously some of them are very good, but I'm sure you don't want an F.
So, well, indeed, but when you speak to our report card, you're talking about a district that is incredibly diverse with our students, our households, both in backgrounds, income, race, and even experience. We're one of the only few districts in Northeast Ohio that have a relatively large refugee population, for example. We are educating people from all over the world, coming from all over many experiences. And the way state tests are situated or function is that they expect people to be at certain levels basically within a year or potentially 2 years. And that's just not the reality of how learning occurs, whether you're from the United States or not. And so what we do is at the Lakewood is very strong wraparound programming to make sure all of our students have access to teachers, the classes, and the work that they need. We know that they will be fine in their 20s when they're productive adults, but perhaps on these tests, on these certain days of the year that they're tested on certain elements, that some students may not be, where a district that's full of people who have very high incomes and really come from the same background may be able to score just fine on. So I think it's about supporting the programs that we have, being aware of this. I'm not trying to ignore the fact that these grades are there. It's just that we have to be realistic about what we can do, and generally speaking, our families and households have very good experience with the schools.
Okay, Mr. Calleri.
Sure. You'll hear from some of my opponents that we have excellent rated schools, and we certainly do. The problem isn't with that. Excellent rating is becoming the participation trophy of the educational field. 2 out of every 3 schools in Ohio are excellent rated or better. And in fact, if you look into what we've done, we are 317th out of 661 schools, so we're about 50%. And this is at a time when we're in the top 15% of school districts in spending, but our performance is about half. And they'll talk about diversity, they'll talk about these kids. I worked with these kids. We can get them up to speed a lot faster than we're doing, but the bigger concern is you're seeing on graduation rates, our graduation rates have declined. They're making a small comeback, but we are ranked in the bottom third of the state on schools that are ranked in graduation rates, and 53% of our kids who go on to college have to take remedial math, remedial English, and 23% of them have to take both. This is not what we're sending our kids and are paying our money for. It's not our teachers. We have great teachers. It's not our students. We have great students. We have this disconnect where our teachers aren't in the classrooms anymore. Our teachers aren't teaching the fundamentals. Last year, my daughter, who was at Harding, lost over 30 days of education to test prep, not the test, there was another 11 days of that. Test prep, admin, development, teacher meetings, and it continues to this year. My daughter came home the other day and said, teacher wasn't in the class because they had a meeting of teachers during her class period. That's got to stop so that our kids can get the proper education that they rightfully deserve and that they're capable of getting.
Okay, Mr. Einhouse.
So the question is about the report cards.
Report card, yes.
So of the 5,400 diverse students, we have over 460 ELL or English language learners, and of that group, over 170 are immigrants, or refugees rather. And a lot of them are coming right out of refugee camps and being planted in our community, and we're doing our best to serve them. And as it has been pointed out, we're being held to a standard that's up here, but we're trying to work with people with greater needs up here. So there's really an imbalance when we look at these report cards. I think on the whole, and from my experience, I've had a son who was on an IEP through his school career, and I have another son who's taking advanced placement classes. So I've kind of seen the broad range and everything in between, and I can tell you that the offerings in our system are very strong, and the outcome with our students is also very good and at a very high level.
Okay, Meghan George.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's the way teachers now are needing to teach to the test. I think it's not just a Lakewood issue, it's a societal issue on how we're grading teachers in school districts.
And we're talking about Common Core now? Is that what you're
No,
talking
no,
about?
no.
Oh, okay.
Just speaking of how we're grading school, excellence with distinction.
Okay.
It's just not a Lakewood issue. It's how we're teaching to the test. As you mentioned, there's 30 days, 60 days test prep, where we're not learning about, you know, the English language or history or what have you. It's test prep, and I think we need to get away from that. I think that's a bigger issue than just you know, how we're doing in one area or the other.
Okay, Kristine?
Well, the reality is that the way that we're rated or the school report card is probably not going to change anytime soon. And I think that one of the things I would do, of course, would be a lot of advocacy work around that. I've been doing that for 15 years. I would continue to do that. But the larger picture is, because it's not going to change anytime soon, there are things that we can do to better serve that population. One of them would be in the teachers that we hire. So we know research shows that when you have a diverse population, that when you have a teaching force that mostly reflects that population or more fairly represents that population of students, we have a very small minority teaching force. So diversifying our teaching force. Second, creating partnerships. Assisting our ELL learners, English language learners, and their families when they're here, engaging them in the community, working with outside organizations such as the Lakewood Family Collaborative or Catholic Charities, which we do somewhat. And it's about effective communication. We can work with parent groups, PTAs, to help and bring them in. Once we get them engaged, their success is going to increase. And producing materials in their own language. I can't tell you how many times parents of the kids just don't understand what's going on, and they make mistakes or go to the wrong place. Thank you.
And are there any follow-ups at this point?
I just wanted to note that one program we do have that's not only working with this issue, but more so with our new to the United States population, is that we do have a 3-year now experience working with Asia Services in Action, a local nonprofit, and Muskingum University, where Asia Services in Action comes into our schools and provides programming both after school and during the summer. Muskingum works with teachers to help them, whether it's gain additional credentials or work with the ELL population. And our Lakewood students can participate in these programs both after school and in the summer. And so this is one of those examples where, regardless of that or in spite of it, we have partnerships, and we look to find ways to work with the community to work with those issues.
Okay. Any other follow-ups? Okay. Mr. Calleri?
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on a couple things. You know, let's make clear it's not our teachers. Our teachers aren't being heard by our administration. Our teachers aren't being allowed to make the adjustments they need to, and our teachers are not being put in the classroom. And it's not our students. We have great students. And things can change. A lot of my opponents here said we're stuck with how we are in the report card, and that's absolutely wrong. I taught for 5 years, and I watched in the program that I worked in, our students go from a 33% pass rate to over a 70% pass rate on the same exams. And the hurdles are low for what we have. To get the grades that you were talking about, we have to have 75% of our students score a 40 or better on the exam. So the fact that we're not even achieving those goals bothers me. The fact that our college kids, 53% of them have to be remediated, and to Tom's point, the AP classes, where we have some phenomenal teachers, only 1 out of every 3 kids who takes AP classes for us gets a 3 or better and gets college credit for it.
Okay.
We have to do better. We can do better. We will do better.
All right. And I'm sorry, is that it, or are there any other follow-ups? Okay. So we're just about ready to wrap it up now. This is the opportunity for candidates to ask questions of each other. And I guess we are back to Mr. Calleri. Do you have any questions for your fellow candidates here?
Sure.
Or a question, I should say.
I have a question for the incumbents. Our stated district goal is top 20 in 20. Where do we stand now, and what metrics is this based on, and what is the roadmap and the signpost to get us there?
You want to go first?
I think it's broad. I guess I would want to speak with our superintendent on specific metrics. But I think it's big picture. It's thinking about what we look like in the year 2020 and how we're not only different from where we were a few years ago, but how we're going to compare to other places. We already have a breadth and depth of course offerings and programming that most other places don't. And so I think it's a matter of looking forward to what we will have and continuing those, and really ensuring both a combination of fiscal health as well as holding true to those programs that are important to us. I would say for metrics, I would be looking for things like graduation rates, what our students are doing 10 years after they graduate, things like that. I don't know if you want to add anything.
Well, specifically on graduation rates, we're being, the whole model has changed. Now we're to track a student from the time he was in our system through, he or she, through their entire school career if they move out of the system. So if they graduate in another system. So the responsibility and the whole metric for that has changed. It's, you know, being in the top 20 by 2020 is a really great aspiration. It's a motivator. You know, when we talk to the teachers at convocation, there's a lot of enthusiasm toward that goal. And right, it is a very broad spectrum of things. You know, it's stability on finances and enhancing programs, curricula, and a better experience for the students.
Okay. Did you have any questions, Mr. Einhouse, for any of your fellow candidates? Okay. Meghan George?
Yeah, I guess I'd like to ask, you know, Kristine, what do you think are the biggest challenges, I guess, facing the future of the Lakewood schools?
I think there's some local issues, and I also think there's some broader issues. I think all school districts, as I mentioned before, we really are up against the state and how we fund our schools. I think that there is attack on public education in this state. I do not agree with charter schools or vouchers in any way that I think it takes from the funding of our kids. And so that is huge. And that's why I think we talked a lot tonight about budgets and values and priorities, because it does hang over us. And we're really uncertain. There's some really good decisions being made right now by our Supreme Court regarding charter schools. I support those. So I think that that's a real challenge. And that trickles down to the local issues and how we figure out how do we save great programs like music? How do we prepare our kids for a global market? And the technology that we use. Thank you.
Okay. Well, and now we're up to you if you have any questions for any of your fellow candidates.
Well, I do have a stickler of a question that I want to bring up, because I think it's somewhat of the elephant in the room in our city. And that is, we all know that in the news and in our city, we're talking a lot about the closing of Lakewood Hospital. And I've been thinking about that deeply, because I am concerned about the loss of $300 million, the projected negative impact that would have on our economy and how it affects our schools. And when I reason that out and think that we pay for our schools based on property taxes and how well we do economically, I have some concerns. And is that an issue for the school board? We have, in case you didn't know, 3 of the current school board members signed a letter supporting the closure of, say, Lakewood Hospital, and so it puzzles me.
I'm sorry, signed a letter
in support of closing Lakewood Hospital. And so it puzzles me, and I would like the take from, of course, our current school board members and candidates about what they think about that closure and what that means for our Lakewood City schools.
Okay. I guess why don't we start with Mrs. Petrie-Barcelona.
So I guess there's a few things. One is with regard to, say, desirability for a community. A lot of people live in a place like Bay Village, and there's no hospital there. So I know that, but access to meaningful health care and healthcare resources are part of a vibrant and a good community. In the schools, we are now using we have a partnership actually through the Cleveland Clinic for a mobile health clinic. So we are now able 1 day a week to have healthcare on site for primarily the high school, but hopefully soon in the middle school as well, to make sure that when kids need well visits, if they need to see a doctor, a practitioner, of course with their parents' permission, we are now bringing, with other communities, healthcare to students to help decrease things like days missed because of health issues, or for that matter, chronic conditions that students may have, or mental health issues that they can work with. So I hope that we have a good healthcare future in Lakewood.
Okay. And Mr. Calleri.
Sure. Unfortunately, Kristine, I'm only going to be able to give you a partial answer. I sit on the city's audit committee, and we have been asked on several occasions to give opinions and review things. And I can tell you I've looked through over 1,000 pages of contracts. I've written many reports that I'm sure that you could get, and I've raised concerns. about how do we deal with the schools, how do we deal with losing this, how do we deal with the contract, but it would be absolutely wrong of me as a public figure, while I have personal opinions, to take a stand and say, this is what's going on. I think that's one of the problems we saw with the current school board was they have personal beliefs that they believe in strongly, and I understand, but when you take a belief as a board member, you then bring that belief to everyone because people see you that way, and the perception becomes the school board feels this way. And I think we need to be very cautious on that to make sure that what we do as a school board represents everybody in the best interest of the city and not our personal preference.
Mr. Einhouse.
I'm very concerned for the future of the community and the wellness of our children. I see things that could be done in our future that would be preventative care, keep people from needing to go to the hospital. The hospital, I believe, does not pay property taxes, so I don't think there would be an impact from that, but other developments certainly could provide opportunities for income tax to go to the school.
Okay, and Meghan?
Yeah, I would just like to say I fully support saving Lakewood Hospital. I think it's a very important resource for our community. A lot of economic development stems from having a full hospital system in the city of Lakewood. So with that, yeah, I just would like to say I fully support saving Lakewood Hospital and keeping it in the city of Lakewood.
Okay. And I guess we're up to Mrs. Petrie-Barcelona.
Can I to respond to an answer to my question for some clarification, or no?
Oh, okay. Sure.
Well, I just want to bring up the mobile health clinic. I'd like to know who pays for that. And although I think that's a positive thing for our schools, it doesn't replace the doctors, the permanent doctors that would be lost in our city. Kids do need to see the doctor in the summer when they're hurt, not on, the school hours. So that's kind of discerning to me. I do believe that our school district, and I do have a question into the superintendent regarding this, does benefit from payroll taxes. And of course the trickle-down effect of if we're not making as much money in our businesses or we have decreased property values, I think that will decrease our viability of our schools. So I'd like to hear about who pays for the Cleveland Clinic and how that works. But I also, I would have to agree with Meghan that I do support saving Lakewood Hospital and think that that's a resource that we can't lose.
So the Cleveland Clinic Mobile Clinic is a 3-year grant funded. I think it's probably through the Cleveland Clinic Foundation or one of those. Okay. So it's there. Mm-hmm. But I would say right now Lakewood Hospital has nothing to do with primary care, and what your comment is on primary care, and I would hope that primary care would still be available in Lakewood, and at least from what I've seen, hopefully primary care would still be part of any new entity that would exist should Lakewood Hospital not be there.
That's the unknown that we're up against, definitely. Right.
So, well, okay. I can't use the clinic, so I don't know. My health insurance doesn't go there, so I can't be in Lakewood anyway.
All right. Mrs. Petrie-Barcelona, did you have any, I think we're up to you now. Did you have any questions for your fellow candidates? No. Okay. Mr. Calleri?
I had already asked my question.
Oh, you already did? Okay, we're done.
Asked and answered. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's all the time that we have. Please check back to cleveland.com to read stories about the debates, issues, and candidates for the upcoming election. Early voting starts October 6th, and thanks again for joining us.